Imagine you are standing in the deepest, darkest part of a rainforest. The air is thick, humid, and heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The canopy above you is so dense it feels like a permanent green twilight. A ceiling of interwoven branches and leaves that has blocked out the sky for centuries. It's a world of shadows, of muted greens and browns, where sound is dampened and light is a precious commodity. You can hear the distant calls of hidden birds, the rustle of something unseen in the undergrowth, but you cannot see far. This is the realm of perpetual gloom. Now hold that image, because what we are about to explore is not just the jungle itself, but one of the most breathtaking, almost spiritual phenomena it offers. The moment when a single powerful beam of sunlight, a sun ray, defiantly punches through that impossibly dense foliage. That shaft of light, visible and tangible in the misty air, doesn't just illuminate, it transforms. It turns ordinary dust motes into dancing diamonds, a patch of moss into a glowing emerald carpet, and a simple spiderweb into a tapestry of silver and gold. This isn't just pretty scenery, this is a fundamental physical and ecological event, a daily drama of light and life that dictates the rhythm of the entire jungle. That beam of light is a lifeline, a clock, a signal, and a symbol of hope, all rolled into one. To understand it is to understand the very heartbeat of the rainforest. The journey of that single sun ray begins, of course, 93 million miles away on the surface of our sun, a raging nuclear furnace. The light energy created there travels through the vacuum of space for over 8 minutes before it even touches the outer edges of our planet's atmosphere. Once it hits the atmosphere, it scatters. That's what gives us our blue sky. And then it approaches the green roof of the world. The first layer it encounters is the emergent layer, the very tops of the tallest trees, like Capot giant dipterocarps that rise like skyscrapers above everything else. These giants get the full, unfiltered blast of solar radiation. But then, the light descends into the main canopy, a zone so packed with life, so efficient at capturing light, that it acts as a near impenetrable barrier. This canopy, often 100 feet thick, is a complex architecture of leaves, each one a tiny solar panel evolved over millennia to capture every possible photon for photosynthesis. They are arranged in a mosaic, a phenomenon called leaf mosaic, that minimizes overlap and maximizes light capture, leaving very few direct gaps. This is why the forest floor is so dark. Perhaps only 1% to 2% of the sunlight that hits the top of the forest actually makes it down to the ground level. But the forest is not a static, solid roof. It is dynamic. Winds, even gentle ones high above, cause the massive branches and countless leaves to sway. Trees grow, branches fall, and leaves are eaten. This constant state of subtle flux creates temporary, shifting perforations in the green veil. And it is through these fleeting, moving gaps that our hero, the sun ray, makes its dramatic entrance. The angle is critical. This event isn't common at high noon, when the sun is directly overhead. Light then comes in more vertically, often still filtered by layers upon layers of leaves. The most dramatic, horizontal, visible beams occur in the early morning or late afternoon, when the sun is low on the horizon. At this shallow angle, the light has to travel through a much greater thickness of the atmosphere, which scatters the blue light away, leaving the richer, warmer reds and oranges. This is the same reason sunrises and sunsets are colorful. But in the jungle, this low-angle light finds those rare, long corridors through the foliage, creating long, drawn-out beams that slice diagonally through the woods like celestial spotlights. The presence of moisture in the air mist, evaporation, transpiration from the millions of leaves is the final actor in this play. Without these suspended water droplets, the light beam would be invisible, just an illuminated patch on the forest floor. But with them, the light scatters off each tiny droplet, a process called the Tyndall effect, rendering the path of the beam itself visible as a solid, glowing column of gold. It's a literal spotlight on the stage of the forest floor. And when it appears, the entire ecosystem pays attention. This is not just a visual spectacle for us, it is a crucial environmental cue. So, our sun ray has successfully navigated 93 million miles of space and 100 feet of dense foliage to finally strike the dim forest floor. It's a transient victory, perhaps lasting only a few minutes as the sun moves or leaves sway. But in those minutes, that illuminated patch becomes the most valuable real estate in the entire jungle. This is where the term sun fleck comes from in ecology, a transient, highlight spot in an otherwise low-light understory. For the plants living in the perpetual shade, these sun flecks are not just a nice bonus. They are a matter of survival and the key to a frantic, hyper-efficient energy rush. Plants on the forest floor, like certain ferns, seedlings, and shade-tolerant shrubs, have evolved to be masters of low-light conditions. They often have larger, darker green leaves packed with more chlorophyll to capture every possible photon, but they live on the edge of energy bankruptcy. Their photosynthesis operates just above the compensation point, where they make just enough sugar to stay alive. When a sun fleck appears, it's like a sudden massive power surge. These plants have an incredible ability to switch on their photosynthetic machinery almost instantly. Unlike many sun-loving plants that need time to adjust, they capture the sudden flood of light energy with remarkable efficiency, converting it into chemical energy at a rapid rate. They are, in essence, light forging. They are waiting in the shadows, prepared to make a financial windfall the moment the bank of light opens for business. The behavior of this beam of light is a physics lesson in itself. As it streams through the canopy, it doesn't just create a simple circle of light. The gaps between leaves act like natural pinhole cameras, a phenomenon known as camera obscura. Each tiny gap projects a miniature, inverted image of the sun onto the forest floor. If you look closely at the dappled light patterns, you're not just seeing blobs of light. You are seeing hundreds, sometimes thousands, of perfect little crescent suns or circular disks, depending on the sun's phase and the shape of the gap. During a partial solar eclipse, for instance, the jungle floor becomes a spectacular display of these crescent-shaped projections, a natural planetarium show. Furthermore, the quality of light inside a sunbeam is different from the diffuse light of the understory. It is richer in the photosynthetically active radiation par that plants create, particularly the red and blue wavelengths that chlorophyll absorbs best. It also carries more thermal energy, slightly warming that specific patch of soil and air. This microclimate change, however brief, triggers a cascade of biological activity. Cool-blooded insects, like butterflies or beetles, will flutter into the beam to bask and raise their body temperature, increasing their metabolism and activity levels. A lizard might dart onto a sun-warmed log precisely placed in the light. The beam creates a thermal oasis in the cool, damp forest. But the drama intensifies when we consider the competition. That beam of light is a contested resource. A seedling that germinates directly in a frequent sun-fleck location has a lottery ticket to the canopy. It will grow faster, stronger, and outcompete its neighbors still languishing in the shade. This is how gaps in the canopy created by a falling tree, a phenomenon we call a light gap, become battlegrounds for the next generation of giants. Fast-growing, light-hungry pioneer species race to colonize these gaps, their seeds often lying dormant in the soil for years, just waiting for this exact signal, a sustained flood of light and warmth. The sun ray is thus the ultimate agent of change and succession. It dictates the architecture of the forest from the ground up. Plants don't just sit and wait, some even move to chase the light. Vines and lianas use the beams as guides, growing strategically towards these light sources to hoist their leaves into the brighter canopy. The beam is a navigational aid, a growth signal, and a limited resource that shapes the struggle for life in the jungle. It creates a vertical hierarchy of light, from the full sun emergent to the partially shaded understory, to the dark forest floor, with each layer hosting a completely adapted community of life. This single phenomenon drives biodiversity. By creating such a varied mosaic of light conditions, bright flecks, deep shade, and everything in between across a small area, it allows countless species with different light requirements to coexist. A hectare of rainforest might contain more plant species than an entire continent's temperate forests. And a primary reason is this complex, dappled, ever-changing lightscape created by the sun's rays fighting their way down. Now let's shift our perspective from the ecological to the deeply personal and psychological. Why do we as humans find the image of sun rays breaking through dense jungle foliage so universally and profoundly moving? This image is a staple of calendars, inspirational posters, and cinematic moments. It's not a coincidence. Our reaction is a complex tapestry woven from biology, psychology, and symbolism. On a primal level, our vision is drawn to light. In a scene of low contrast and murky shadows, a bright beam is a focal point, a place of clarity and safety. For our ancient ancestors, navigating a dense, predator-filled forest, a clearing filled with light meant an exit, an open space where threats could be seen, a potential campsite, or a source of warmth. Light equaled safety, orientation, and hope. Dark, tangled shadows, on the other hand, triggered vigilance and caution, the domain of the unknown. So, when we see that beam piercing the gloom, it triggers a deep-seated subconscious relief. It signals a path, a way out, a sanctuary. This is likely hardwired into our limbic system, the emotional center of our brain. The beam reduces cognitive load. It simplifies a chaotic visual scene into a clear narrative of light versus dark, guidance versus lostness. Psychologically, this image is a powerful metaphor that our minds instantly decode. The dense jungle represents challenge, confusion, the complexities and hardships of life, the thick of it. The impenetrable foliage is our problems, our fears, the clutter in our minds. The sun ray, in stark contrast, represents breakthrough, clarity, divine inspiration, hope, and guidance. It is the light at the end of the tunnel, the moment of epiphany, the sudden answer to a persistent problem. It symbolizes a force from above, whether spiritual, intellectual, or emotional, cutting through the chaos to provide direction and warmth. This is why the imagery is so prevalent in religious and spiritual contexts across cultures, representing divine intervention, grace, or enlightenment. In storytelling, filmmakers and photographers use these God rays or crepuscular rays to denote a moment of significance, a reveal, a divine presence, or a character's moment of profound realization. The light doesn't just illuminate the scene, it sanctifies it. It tells the viewer, pay attention. This place, this moment is special. Furthermore, the visual composition is inherently beautiful due to the principles of contrast, leading lines, and atmosphere. The extreme contrast between the deep shadows and the brilliant light creates dynamic range that is visually striking. Beams themselves act as natural leading lines, drawing the viewer's eye from the foreground into the depth of the scene, creating a powerful sense of immersion and scale. The visibility of the beams, thanks to atmospheric haze, adds volume and texture to the light, making it feel tangible, almost liquid. You feel you could reach out and touch the light, swim in it. This quality of light is often called volumetric lighting in visual arts, and it's a key tool for creating mood, depth, and emotion. It transforms a flat scene into a three-dimensional immersive space. For us in the modern, often overstimulated world, this image also represents a deep, visceral connection to a primordial, untouched nature. It's a glimpse into a world that operates on rhythms far older and more fundamental than our digital, urban lives. It evokes a sense of awe, a feeling that there are still places of raw, majestic beauty where ancient dramas of light and life play out daily indifferent to human concerns. This awe has a measurable effect, reducing stress and increasing feelings of connectedness and well-being. But the metaphor extends beyond the personal to the global and environmental. Today, the world's rainforests, these very cathedrals of light and life, are themselves in a state of deep shadow, the shadow of deforestation, climate change, and biodiversity loss. They are the dense, complex problem. In this context, the sun rays breaking through can symbolize the efforts of conservation science, indigenous stewardship, and global awareness, the beams of hope, data, and action that are trying to pierce the canopy of apathy and destruction. Every new protected area, every successful reforestation project, every policy shift driven by clear data is a sun ray. It's a small focus point of light and warmth in a large, dark scenario. It shows that change is possible, that clarity can be found, and that life can flourish where light is allowed to reach, in this case, the light of knowledge, compassion, and concerted action. So when we are drawn to this image, we're not just seeing a pretty natural phenomenon, we are resonating with a story that is ecological, personal, and planetary all at once. It is a story of struggle, perseverance, and the triumphant, beautiful moment of breakthrough. For the photographers, filmmakers, and nature enthusiasts among us, capturing that perfect shot of sun rays breaking through the trees is a holy grail. It's about translating that profound feeling into a tangible image or video, but it's not just about pointing your camera at the woods on a sunny day. It's a hunt that requires understanding the very science and timing we've been discussing. First and foremost, the conditions are everything. You need the three key ingredients: a dense source of shadow, the thick foliage, a strong directional light source, the sun, and a medium to make the light visible, atmospheric particles. This means the perfect time is almost always early morning, just after sunrise, or late afternoon, leading into sunset. This is when the sun is low, creating those long, diagonal beams. The magic hour, the golden hour, provides that warm, soft, directional light. But crucially, you need atmosphere. A perfectly clear, dry day after a rain is often less ideal for visible beams than a humid morning where mist is rising from the ground or lingering in the valleys. Fog is your best friend. Even dust or pollen in the air can help. Look for locations where moisture naturally gathers, near rivers, lakes, and valleys, or in dense, old-growth forests with high humidity. Scouting your location is a separate skill. You need to find a spot where the canopy is thick enough to create deep shadow, but with strategic gaps that align with the sun's path. Use a compass or a sun tracking app to predict where the sun will be at sunrise or sunset relative to your location. Look for clear lines of sight into the forest from an eastern or western vantage point. Compositionally, you want to create depth. Use elements in the foreground: a mossy log, a fern, a curved branch to frame the shot and lead the eye into the scene, following the beams into the heart of the forest. A wide-angle lens can exaggerate the perspective and make the beams feel more expansive, while a telephoto lens can compress the scene, making the beams appear denser and more layered. Technically, this is a high contrast situation, which is challenging for camera sensors. Shooting in a RAW format is non-negotiable. It gives you the most data to recover details in the highlights, the bright beams and shadows, the dark forest in post-processing. Expose for the highlights. It's better to have the shadows go very dark. You can recover some detail later, than to have the beautiful beams blown out into featureless white. Use a low ISO to keep noise down in the shadows. A tripod is essential, as you'll often be shooting in low light with smaller apertures. Speaking of apertures, this is where a key creative choice comes in. Your aperture f-stop dramatically affects how the sun rays look. A wide aperture, like f2.8, will create a softer, more diffused beam. But if you want those sharp, defined laser-like rays, You need a narrow aperture, think f16 or even f22. The narrow aperture causes the light to diffract around the blade edges of the lens diaphragm, creating the starburst effect and defining the edges of the beams. Be aware that a very narrow aperture lets in less light, necessitating a longer shutter speed, hence the need for that rock-solid tripod. Use manual focus. Autofocus will struggle in the low-contrast gloom. Focus on a subject within the beam, or use focus peaking if your camera has it. For videographers, the same principles apply, but with the added dimension of time. You can capture the beam moving as the sun rises or sets, or as mist drifts through it. Slow, subtle camera movements on a slider or gimbal can add a breathtaking cinematic quality, making the viewer feel like they are floating into the scene. A polarizing filter can be a double-edged sword. It can cut through haze and reflections on leaves, sometimes making the beams less visible, but it can also deepen the blues in the sky patches and saturate the greens. It's worth experimenting with. The hunt itself is part of the experience. It requires patience and presence. You might scout a location, set up in the pre-dawn chill and wait. And then, as the sun crests the horizon, you see it, the first golden spear of light lancing through the trees, touching the mist. It's a reward for your preparation, but the work isn't over back at the computer. Post-processing is where you sculpt the light you captured. Use the raw files sliders to carefully bring down the highlights to recover detail in the brightest parts of the beams and lift the shadows just enough to reveal texture in the forest, but not so much that you kill the contrast that makes the image powerful. Clarity and dehaze tools can be used subtly to enhance the texture of the light and the depth of the scene. The goal is not to create a fake HDR monstrosity, but to faithfully enhance the dynamic range and mood your eye perceived, but your sensor could only partially capture. The final image or video should feel like an invitation, a window into that moment of transcendence you witnessed. It should carry the quiet awe, the sharp contrast, and the hopeful warmth of the original scene. Mastering this capture is more than a technical skill. It's a form of visual storytelling, of sharing a universal moment of natural magic with others who weren't there in the silent, misty woods with you. We've followed the sun ray from its cosmic origin to its ecological impact, its psychological resonance, and the art of capturing it. Now let's conclude by zooming out to the grandest scale and considering this phenomenon not just as an event in a forest, but as a critical component of our planet's life support system. Those beams of light are the fundamental delivery mechanism for the energy that powers the most vital green infrastructure on Earth, the tropical rainforests. And these forests are not merely collections of trees, they are active, breathing, weather-making engines that stabilize the global climate in ways we are only beginning to fully comprehend. The process starts with that light energy. When it is captured by the canopy leaves, it drives photosynthesis, the alchemy that turns carbon dioxide and water into glucose and oxygen. But a rainforest relationship with the sun is about more than just making food for itself. The vast canopy, acting as a giant and even solar radiator, plays a decisive role in the hydrologic cycle. The sunlight powers transpiration, where trees pull water from their roots and release it as vapor through their leaves. A single large tree can release hundreds of gallons of water into the atmosphere each day. An entire rainforest creates massive, invisible rivers of water vapor that rise into the sky. This is where the sun rays breaking through imagery connects to something vast and invisible. That moist, rising air contributes to cloud formation. In fact, rainforests like the Amazon generate their own rainfall through this constant transpiration, creating a self-sustaining precipitation cycle. The clouds they form don't just rain on the forest, they influence wind patterns and distribute rainfall across continents. Scientists speak of flying rivers, atmospheric flows of moisture that travel for thousands of miles. The deforestation of the Amazon, for instance, could disrupt rainfall patterns as far away as the American Midwest or Europe. So, the light that creates the beautiful beams also fuels this planetary scale water pump. Furthermore, The complex, uneven heating of the canopy by dappled sunlight creates micro-turbulence and influences local wind patterns within the forest, aiding in pollination and seed dispersal. The forest, through its interaction with sunlight, actively engineers its own environment. The sun rays are the spark for this immense, living engine. The climate regulation function goes even deeper. Rainforests are colossal carbon sinks. The glucose created from sunlight, water, and CO2 is used to build wood, leaves, roots biomass. This locks away atmospheric carbon for decades or centuries. The dappled light environment allows for massive vertical stacking of life, meaning a huge amount of living matter, and thus carbon, is stored in a relatively small area. When we lose rainforests, we lose this carbon storage capacity and release that stored carbon back into the atmosphere, accelerating climate change. But perhaps even more crucially, we lose the forest's cooling effect. A dense, dark green canopy has a relatively low albedo, meaning it absorbs most of the sunlight that hits it, using it for transpiration and photosynthesis, rather than reflecting it back to space like ice or sand would. This absorbed energy is largely used to evaporate water, which has a powerful cooling effect on the local and regional climate. Compare walking on an asphalt parking lot to walking in a forest on a sunny day. The forest is cooler because the solar energy is being used for biological and hydrological work, not just converted into sensible heat. On a global scale, this biotic pump and cooling system is a major thermostat. This brings us to a poignant and urgent point. The very beauty we've been celebrating, the sun ray breaking through, is often most dramatic in old-growth primary forests. These are the forests with the tallest, most layered canopies, the most complex architecture, and the deepest, most mystical light. They are also the forests most under threat. When a forest is logged or cleared, that intricate light filtering system is destroyed. The sun doesn't gently dapple the floor, it bakes the bare earth. The hydrological cycle breaks down, the carbon is released. The cooling effect vanishes. The image of a lone, beautiful sunbeam in an intact forest thus becomes a powerful symbol for resilience, but also a reminder of fragility. It represents the intricate, balanced, and awe-inspiring system that is still functioning, still performing its ancient, vital duties. Every time we protect an acre of primary forest, we are preserving billions of these daily light shows, each one a cog in a machine that keeps our planet stable, humid, breathable, and teeming with life. So, the next time you see a photograph or video of this scene, or are fortunate enough to witness it in person, see it with new eyes. See the physics, the pinhole cameras, the Tyndall effect, the long journey of light. See the ecology, the frantic photosynthesis, the animal behavior, the competitive struggle. See the metaphor, the hope, the clarity, the breakthrough. See the art, the composition, the light sculpting, the patient hunt. And finally, see the planetary system. The engine of rain, the carbon vault, the global cooler. That single beam of light is a thread connecting the nuclear heart of a star to the breath in your lungs, the stability of our climate, and the deepest feelings of awe in the human soul. It is a reminder that in nature, nothing is merely pretty. Everything is connected, purposeful, and profound. The sun ray breaking through the dense jungle foliage is not just a sight, it is a story of our planet, written in light and leaf, a story we must both cherish and protect.